Hello and welcome to the Tiny But Mighty podcast. I am E, your host. We celebrate small businesses exclusively on this channel. And today I am very, very excited for you to be able to meet our guest, Pauline Dougald. After 15 years in corporate, working really rigid analytical jobs as a creative individual and forcing herself to fit inside of those roles, she has combined a bunch of research and her creative side to be capable of coaching others to be able to dig in and find their creativity. She works with people to use different techniques as well as different tools to be able to help them to reach new heights in their creativity and reconnect with themselves. She talks a lot about flow state, which I'm very curious about, especially from the standpoint of creative work and how to get into flow state, especially when you're just not feeling it. Hopefully, we get to plenty of those topics. I'm looking forward to introducing her to you now. Let's bring her up on the stage. Hi, Pauline.
Hello, everybody.
How are you today?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. So, give us a little bit more about what brought you to entrepreneurship. What's your story coming into this?
Absolutely. My story begins as an artist. I was born in Russia and I studied fine arts there. And so during my high school years, I thought and I intended for my life to be all about art and design. And so that was my focus then. I had the tools, I had the skills. Everything seemed to be pretty straightforward. Get into the design college, learn design and art aspects, and start working in that field. What could have gone wrong? And at some point, I moved from Russia to Canada and I studied interior design there. And for years after, I discovered that it was not so easy to actually get into the creative profession. There were so many obstacles, so many things in the way. And so as a result, I spent a lot of years in project management and coordination and all aspects of analytical profession, all aspects that had to deal with results and clear outcomes and performance, all of that. And so after 15 years of that, there came a time when I realized, well, what about all the artistic and creative skills that I once dreamed about? What about them? And so I went on a journey to reconnect with them. And the way that I went about it is first helping myself through coaching tools and then acquiring those tools and then using them to help others as well. So it's a multidimensional journey that I have been on. And so this is where it led me to this point now where I'm now.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like this is the time frame, 15, 20, 10 to 20 years into our journeys. A lot of times people pick up their heads and go, "Wait a second, am I where I thought I was going to be?" And they reflect on that and make decisions from there. And there's plenty of people that decide that they're, even if this wasn't what they thought, they're going to keep going on that journey. But a lot of the folks that I interview on this podcast really do talk about that almost awakening moment where they're saying, have I given up on something that I really believe in and need? And that's really what it sounds like for you, that you're trying to reconnect with those pieces.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. By the way, in your background, I see a gorgeous motorcycle painting. Did you paint that?
Yeah, I painted all of this. As I said, I'm an artist. I had tools and skills. So this is what I learned early in life. And so I paint mostly bikes because I love bikes and I ride bikes. And sometimes I draw nature as well and paint, but mostly it's oil and canvas that I have been doing for a while.
That's amazing. Those are gorgeous. Do you do like custom ones where people can send you a picture of their bike, or?
I totally could do that. I haven't had much of those, but maybe I need to advertise better. But yeah, I could. And I did in the past.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool birthday gift for someone who's an enthusiast. Awesome. So, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were little, what was your vision of what your future was going to be?
When I was little and in my teenage years, all I could think of was fashion design and then subsequently interior design. That was the only things I really involved myself in, played around with, and did anything with.
Awesome. So, the hard part about that, though, is that you went into that interior design and it wasn't what you expected, right?
It's not that it wasn't what I expected. I just couldn't get a job in that field for whatever
Oh,
reason. And I blame it not enough education, not good enough education, whatever. I could find lots of excuses as to why. But the end result was at the beginning, especially. And I think a lot of people might relate to that. Everybody asks you to have an experience in order to work somewhere, but in order to get experience, you have to work somewhere. So it's a catch-22 situation that I could not figure out a way to get in unless I worked for free, which I couldn't. So that's kind of okay. Well, it's either that or I have to do the jobs that don't have creativity in them. So that was the options at that time.
Yeah, that is many, many industries. The scientific industry notwithstanding either, because there's so many unpaid internship opportunities that they're looking to get that free labor so that you can have the experience because you're graduating in an entry level role says that you're supposed to have 1 to 2 years experience already with your bachelor's degree and they're still paying entry level wages, but they are looking for that experience, which apparently you're supposed to magically get while you're studying.
Well, nothing kills dreams faster than the frustration of trying to do the thing that you know you can do, you know you want to do, and yet there's this seemingly impenetrable wall that stands in the way. And that's what I experienced for many years.
Yeah, wow. It's interesting because I'm a former high school teacher, and I still stay in contact with some of my students. And as they're graduating college and they're heading out into the world, they get discouraged pretty quickly because it's such a wild ride applying to all of these jobs and trying to get in for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned, inside of the fact that there's a little bit of a luck factor too, because you have to find exactly the right role and apply to it at exactly the right moment in order to even get your resume seen.
Well, and it's interesting because we tell people just do what you love and everything else will figure out itself.
Right.
That sounds great, but it sounds also like a hypocritical approach because I even tried waiting for things and reapplying later. Like I would wait for a job to appear and I kept watching, like hunting for it. And even that didn't work. So I'm like, well, follow your dreams, do what you love. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you're still pursuing your art in other ways. And it's important that you're capable of doing it now. But you're certainly not alone. It's not but that doesn't make it better. Just because you're not alone doesn't mean that it's not difficult to be able to deal with.
Yeah, and everybody has experiences that they might compare to others. They might think, oh, well, others had it worse, and my experience is not as bad. But actually, everyone experiences what they experience, and nobody should be downplaying what it is that they're feeling and how somebody else's life could be so much worse, and all of that thinking. If somebody is having challenges at work, in their career, following their dreams, it is relevant and it worth of just being patient and supporting self and being compassionate towards the self about that the discouragement, about that difficulty.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have a tendency to minimize. So, when did you officially start your business? And I do want to mention so, business and a podcast. I forgot that in the intro. So, The Reluctant Hero is your podcast. I was listening to an episode before the show. Very, very good guests. I've listened to 3 episodes actually, because I just started digging in right away and hearing their wisdom. But your insights are fantastic. I love the back and forth that you have on your podcast. When did you start that? And when did you start the business?
So my business, I started it in May 2020. Just as we had the first months of pandemic lockdowns, I started on this journey of entrepreneurship. And my podcast started 2 years ago. And I first started as the motorsport experience because I was all about the bikes, talking to the people I was riding with. But then I shifted towards the reluctant hero because I shifted it more towards the journey of the hero's path. And that became a broader approach, which before was a little bit stifling, a little bit narrow. And so I broadened it. And in over the last probably 12 months, it's been just Reluctant Hero with different stories created for inspiration.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. So the business first was not really modeled around that, but have you found that you're building relationships through your podcast guests that are maybe going to eventually lead towards business? Or is this kind of just that's a passion project that you just want to have conversation?
It is all connected because it's all part of my artistic creative expression. And
Mm,
so the thought behind the podcast was to provide value in whichever way I could, which connects back into my business, which then builds the network and allows people to understand what exactly that I do. Because being a creative and being an artist, and being a very well-rounded person, my business approach has not been easy to explain. I work with so many different modalities, so many different things and aspects, and I help people in different options and things. So it's been my challenge to exactly articulate what is my message, who am I working with, what problem am I solving. Very masculine approach. And throughout the podcast, I've been trying to express what is at the root of it, what is at the bottom and the essence of my business, of the art diversion.
Oh, I love that. And it's interesting you bring up the masculine piece because you do discuss the balance between masculine and feminine very frequently in the podcast and other things that you put out. If you could boil that down for a business owner inside of like just one sentence, what would you say people really need to know about that?
Well, it's a tricky thing to boil it down into one sentence, but like Einstein said, if you can't explain a complex thing simply, that you don't really understand it. So masculine and feminine, in my perception, is like a tree. So imagine a tree that has a trunk which is solid, which is supportive and strong, and it's stable and it's holding up everything. But on top of it, you have a crown of leaves. Leaves is the feminine, and it is supported through the juice and the energy that flows from the ground into the leaves and the sun that hits the leaves and creates the effect of the transmutation of the energy into the photosynthesis. So that is the combination of how masculine and feminine work together.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, what brought you to the final decision to start your business? Kind of what was the last straw that made you decide that you were going to go for it?
It wasn't so much even the last straw for me. It was just the innate desire to do it. It wasn't like I was going through something and I had to like make a decision. It was something that my creativity pushed me towards and I was very excited about. That's the thing. It wasn't I was trying to express myself fully and authentically, and I thought the business was the perfect vehicle for that. And I was so incredibly excited to start working and sharing with people about all the things that I learned and helped me, that all of that energy and all of that excitement, that was like the energy going into the roots of the tree and creating the leaves on top.
I love that. So, what you're doing right now, is it what you thought you would be doing when you set out and started the business in 2020? How has it transformed over time?
Oh, it transformed greatly. Everything has been pivoting and shifting constantly. There's never been actually even a year where my business stayed the same. Originally, what I set out to create was just business based on peak performance. Because remember, I came out of corporate environment. I was all about performance and productivity and hitting the goals and KPIs and SOPs and all of that. So I thought, and I learned flow state science. And I was like, oh my God, this is gonna help people to be more productive, create more results, and be better performance at work and business, blah blah blah. And what I discovered is that was very limiting approach. And what I've been adding to that over the years has been all aspects of creativity and spirituality as well. Archetypal work, masculine and feminine, creativity, innate desire, everything that has to do with flow, the energy work, even shamanic aspects as well have been added recently to the whole complex event. Like my business is like an event that's happening. So that's how it's been transforming.
So, would you say they come out of requests or needs that your coaching clients are demonstrating, and you're just meeting those needs, and then you're realizing, oh, I guess I could just offer this at this point?
So it's not direct requests because nobody directly asks that I need shamanic energy work for
Oh,
myself. Nobody really knows that. It is the intuition that has been guiding me to shifting the avatar, shifting the person that I'm serving, and shifting the problems that I have been solving. But also, in addition to that, I have been receiving feedback. And I've been specifically asking for people to tell me, how do they experience my work? What do they get out of it? And all the answers have been leading me towards adjustments, towards more holistic approach, towards more spirituality and more energy work.
I love that. And would you say that the spirituality and energy work are more feminine in nature, or are they balanced?
they are definitely more feminine in nature, and I had to work on myself a lot in order to actually even be able to speak about that. That
Mm.
was something that was not something that I intended to do, not something that I saw myself doing, but in the process of personal development and personal growth, I started to become more and more open to that idea that I could actually help people with this spirituality aspect. I could help them understand themselves better, which directly leads to creativity. Your creativity is your feminine energy. Without being able to be open, without being able to open your channel to that creativity, the energy doesn't flow, and the ideas don't come out.
Well, while we're on the topic, let's just stay here for a second because what would you say, and you don't have to give away the whole thing, but as like a general rule, would be a really good way for people to root into their creativity and to enter flow state, especially when they're doing something that is maybe challenging or they're afraid of or is a big task?
Well, that's a great question. And flow state in itself is a way, it's a vehicle for us to reconnect with ourselves. But when people are dealing with something challenging, it's actually good. And when people are dealing with something that scares them, that's also an opportunity for transcending that. Because essentially, and that is kind of like scientific fact, in our brains, the pattern for fear or pattern for excitement is exactly the same. So you could use that fear, reframe it as this is exciting, and this gives you a jolt of like electricity to go towards something, because then it triggers the seeking behavior and the dopamine is released, and that leads to flow state. So for the people who are dealing with something challenges, they have to understand that in order to get into the flow state where everything is great and everything flows and creativity exists, the challenge has to come first. It's like preparation. You can't really do something unless you deliberately practice, which is challenging, unless you build up your skills, which is challenging, unless you continue practicing, which incurs the fear. So the challenge comes first, the struggle. It is essential. And the deliberate practice allows for that space to be there so that the skills can be built. Then, once that is in place, if you stay consistent enough with something that really is authentic, that is aligned, that brings you joy, even though it's difficult, eventually it will lead to the flow state by giving you sufficient enough experience and skills and understanding to kind of flow with that. That is the essence of flow state in itself.
Awesome. It's interesting that you say, I talk to my son about that a lot in terms of the fear versus excitement, and it's kind of anxious energy and excitement can be very easily um, misconstrued for one another. And a lot of that I feel has to do with the fact that we're not feeling into our bodies as much. We're very much on the go and racing and not focused in on that. I would argue that neurobiologically, like when we look at brain scans, they can tell the difference between excitement and fear. There is nuanced differences, but they are very, very similar. That's actually something that I've shown him to be able to help him. He's a pitcher. And so one of the things that happens in those stressful situations, maybe you've thrown a pitch and he throws very hard, he hits somebody, and now he's completely rattled because now he's afraid. And then he's trying to not hit somebody. And now that's the only thing he's thinking of. Don't hit this guy, don't hit this guy, don't hit this guy. And we talk about the fact that, hey, listen, the brain doesn't work on negatives. That's just not the way it functions. So don't think of a pink elephant. Everybody listening to this just pictured a pink elephant. Mine always has purple polka dots, just in case anybody's wondering. But you cannot not do something with your brain. You can't tell it to not think about something. It's a redirection towards, and I love the way that you said that reframing of the energy and saying, hey, yeah, maybe you are a little anxious because there's plenty of ways that it could go wrong, but you're also probably a little excited because there's plenty of ways that it could also go really well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about the fear. Fear is necessary. It is designed for the survival of the biological organism. We all have to have it in order to survive in this world. We have brains that are designed to keep us safe. So that comes with all kinds of mechanisms. So you just have to work with it. But the thing is, Overthinking. You just said people spend too much time in their brain and not in their body. That is the root of all issues with creativity. If you are overthinking, if you're spending time in the brain, you're not able to connect with the body where the connection to the creativity and the flow exists. That is like the tree that spends all its time in the leaves and the roots are just rotting and nobody's looking at that. That's the essence of what is going on.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, in your opinion, so far, what has been the hardest part of entrepreneurship?
The hardest part of entrepreneurship has been building the connections because it takes a long time to create the network, which then leads to the clients and leads to the growth. It is like the seed, especially like the seed of the bamboo. If you know anything about bamboo, apparently I never grown it, but that's what I understand happens. You have to wait 10 years for the seeds to mature enough underground sufficiently in order to produce the shoots. And even the regular seeds. First, they create the roots and they grow down and then they grow up. So the biggest difficulty with any entrepreneurship is waiting for those roots to grow sufficiently underground until you see anything while there's still nothing showing up, and still being consistent and still persevering through that, even though there is no results visible, but believing that the roots are making their way down and eventually something will grow. That is the most difficult part of the startup, of the small business, and entrepreneurship in general.
I agree. That has definitely been a challenge. And you feel like you're nurturing dirt for a while.
Well, it's like they say, the rock bottom is the fertile soil for growth.
Yes, I love that. I love that. All right. So, on the flip side of that, what is your favorite part so far?
The favorite part is the never ending growth, because as you start the business, as you go into the entrepreneurship direction, there's constantly something new to learn. There's constant unpredictability, which forces you to expand yourself, to learn, to grow, to shift the thinking, to face your fears and to reframe and to challenge yourself and overcome that. There's constantly, it doesn't stop. In entrepreneurship, that is the only thing that's constant. The unpredictability is the thing that is constant.
Absolutely. I love that. So, what is a side mission that you hope to be able to support and maybe elevate, even if it's just talking about it and not, donating money or anything else like that to it over the course of time?
My side mission has always been kind of connected to my work because I'm trying to inspire people to be more creative, because creativity leads to innovation and we need innovation more than ever in the world. So my side mission is, through my efforts and through my podcast and everything I create, is to inspire people to do their own work, do their work of self-exploration and growth, and develop their ways to be authentically creative. Authentic expression is the thing that we're here to learn through our lives, but oftentimes we resist that. So I hope that somehow I inspire people to be better and improve themselves and be more creative, because everybody has an artist inside of them. Even if they think that they can't paint or create music or write poetry, there is some element of creativity that is present in everybody. So my side mission is to increase that even a little bit.
I love that. It's interesting you talk about authenticity, and when you learn from gurus, and I'm using air quotes because most people will not refer to themselves as gurus, but that is really, you think of the Tony Robbins and all of these other thought leaders that exist inside of, especially organizational psychology and industry and stuff like that. You're not going to agree with every single thing that they say. And so, how do you find that has shown up in terms of your authenticity, in terms of using their knowledge and wisdom? Do you find that you have adapted the things that you've learned to be able to utilize them in your way?
I always take the things with a grain of salt. I always you have to be an optimistic skeptic. I love
I
information.
love that. Hold on. Optimistic skeptic. I need to write that down. I love that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes, I learned it from one of my mentors. And so that is kind of what I do. I gather quotes, I remember bits of knowledge, I integrate them into myself, and I try them out. I love new information. I love knowledge, especially the knowledge that helps me to identify my own patterns. Incessantly just can't stop myself from acquiring it. So it doesn't really matter where it comes from or who is speaking it. I know that those people have found that somewhere else. Nothing is new. We're just regurgitating the same ideas. But you have to be ready to hear certain aspects and certain thoughts and certain ideas. Sometimes you need to hear them 50 times from 50 different people. And they are just channels of reminder. If you treat people who are out there speaking as a reminder service and not hanging on to their personality, then you are more able to actually extract the knowledge, utilize it, test it on yourself, use a scientific method. Like, does it work? Does this not work? If I try this, does this make sense? We use logic as well and critical thinking. So that's where analysis comes in handy. You have to kind of question everything, but at the same time, you have to see what resonates the best. And there's so much information out there in the world. My goodness, it's overwhelming. There are things that people talking about, and there's constant communication. There's constant conflicts about the ideas. So you just have to go within and see what really feels right. And that is another aspect of feeling with the body. What does the body say about that information? What does your heart say when you hear certain things about something? That is kind of the intuition, which is connected to creativity, which is connected to authentic self-expression and in alignment with your values. So know yourself, know your values, connect with your intuition, be open, but at the same time, check and verify.
Oh my gosh. That is, from start to finish, it's perfect. I love it. The fact that you are thinking about things in that way absolutely resonates with the way that I have been picking up things along the way as well. The ability to incorporate new data into your personal data set, but also think critically about it, demand evidence to support it, and take what you need and leave the rest, because you're not going to agree with every single person on every single point. And I think we have a tendency as a society and Western cultures in particular to put people up on pedestals and not question anything that they're saying, and have an inability to have discourse when we think, gosh, I don't know that that necessarily fits. This might be the spot where you and I diverge, and here's why. And it sounds like you have more of a capability of having those conversations, which I think is so important when you are learning a lot, because otherwise it can lead you astray.
I always take it from the philosophical approach. And yes, we do tend to put people on pedestals, and that comes from the fundamental patterns of not having a self-worth or self-value sufficient enough to stand in our own authenticity, which is again leads to creativity and authenticity and self-expression. So until people really reconnect with themselves, they will continue putting others on pedestals, and they will continue being not able to have these discourses, because there have been plenty of times where people were not able to say what they believe in because they were afraid. We had plenty of opportunity in the last 4 years to observe things where they haven't been exact evidence for yet, but intuitively feeling into those things, eventually certain things came out to be either right or wrong, whatever. So we have to be able to feel into certain things with their intuition, and then believe into what our body is telling us about that, and then have the discourse based on that, but also a possibility that you might not have all the information at the moment.
Yes. Oh, that's so fantastic. I love that. Thank you so much. So, setting up a business is whew, I don't know about Canada, but there are so many things that setting up a business can be really very challenging in, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, you are based in Canada, correct?
Yes.
The beauty of these kinds of platforms, though, is that we can all be together and none of that really matters. And I think that makes it an interesting view into the future in terms of how borderless we can be with our communications and the way that we work. So this is the third country on the podcast, by the way. So very exciting there. If you could change one thing about setting up a business, and operating it day to day. And I'm going to give you a magic wand. You don't have to worry about any lawmakers getting in your way. You don't have to worry about any semantic, silly things getting in the way. You could just wave the magic wand and change it right now. What would it be?
That's a great question because there are so many complexities in business, like you said. And if I could change one thing, I would do something that would relate to the legalities and insurance aspect of the business, because a lot of businesses go out of business because of some kind of issues with insurance. And that is personally has actually slowed myself down, because not having all the information, not being able to understand all intricacies of legalities of business, just being on my own by myself, and especially business that works with other people, that has slowed my efforts down because of lack of that trust in the system, the
Mm.
full understanding of it, and just not knowing exactly what questions to ask. So if there was some kind of a way in which that risk could be either mitigated or lessened or somehow changed or transformed, I think that would help a lot of businesses to move forward. And I have no idea what kind of solution it could be, other than people just stopping suing each other.
Yeah. Um, and that would be great for sure. But then you think about how many companies have acted in bad faith, knowing full well that people are going to get hurt. I think of the Radium Girls as the perfect example of things where these companies understood that they were working with things that were going to cause them cancer, and they still allowed them to be dipping those paintbrushes and licking them to make sure that they could make those perfect little glow in the dark spots on those watches while their jaws were falling off and they were dying of cancer. So I definitely understand both sides in terms of that. And I think maybe the midpoint is accountability for the bad actors in some way, shape, or form, and some other way to kind of deal with people who are acting in good faith. But certainly we
Actually, accountability and personal responsibility. If there was
yes.
a magic wand and it could imbue everybody on the planet with the full personal responsibility and awareness, I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, I agree. And making sure that their values are leading up front too. You mentioned those before, and that is something that I have conversations with people, and I have turned away business because it has simply not been values aligned. And it's important for me that I'm not sacrificing my values, because you have to do that when you're working for corporate and you have no choice. When you start a business, the whole point is that you're not supposed to have to do that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so if you could give advice to somebody who's just starting off, like one pitfall that maybe they don't have to fall into because you already did it for them or you've seen somebody else do it, what would it be?
That would be knowing that it's going to take much longer than you expect to make the business functional. So if you have a job, don't quit it. If you trying to cut corners, do not. If you're trying to invest in something that you think is going to speed up that business, don't. Businesses are like children, they take certain amount to mature, and it's going to take twice as long, maybe longer than what you expect it to take. So just knowing that, pace yourself. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yes, perfect. Totally agree. If you could have customers take away one thing about you from this episode, what would it be?
I'd love the people in general to know that they have the capacity to be better, do better, and more, be more fulfilled and satisfied if they allow themselves to connect with their own values and align and remember what their dreams are, and just be able to express themselves authentically. That could solve a lot of their problems, even though it might sound difficult at first. It might sound like going against the grain, because if I like color yellow and all the world around me likes color blue, I'm going to stand out, they're not going to like me. So by aligning with what you like and what you enjoy, despite of the fears and risks of how it might seem to the outside, will lead to more creativity, will lead to more innovation, and will lead to more life satisfaction. So if there is anything that people can get out of this episode, it is that they have the ability to make their life better if they just understand themselves more.
That is a very empowering message. And if they are struggling to do that, they could probably work with you to be able to understand that a little better, right?
Well, the motto of Art Diversion is creativity is innate, but diversion for the mind to get the clarity of the inside. With art, we're able to sidestep the critical thinking and the mind for a moment so that the insight can come out. It would provide more clarity so that people can understand better what is going on. And with better understanding, you elevate your consciousness and can move forward in a much better way.
Wow, that's beautiful. I think the critical thinking component has been a block for me when it comes to creativity and art. I do quite a bit of digital art at this point. I can't draw worth a lick. That is just not that. The painting behind you. Oh my goodness, it would look like Picasso or a 3-year-old threw food. So it was never my wheelhouse. I never believed it was my wheelhouse. But being able to connect to creativity has been great. But when that inner critic comes out, and when I start judging too much, and when I start being too critical of the things that are in front of me, or even thinking too much about it and ruminating about, well, if somebody sees this, they're going to think this, and sometimes it just is a thing. And people aren't going to actually read into it. And I need to get myself to really calm down and get to this state of just enjoy and get it all the way to something before you start editing it. Because I think we self edit, we tell ourselves no a lot before we ever release something creative. And a lot of that is a fear of rejection.
Oh, yeah. Inner critic is the standard issued thing on this planet. When you're born, you kind of given the inner critic right away. And then it gets developed into this huge thing that sometimes overshadows the entire being, entire existence. But it takes being able to, and like I say in my art diversion thing, my art is designed to lead others to understand that they have capacity to connect with their art. You don't have to compare your paintings to mine, because that is the style and that is the skill that requires some practice. And somebody really wants to do that, like my daughter, for example, she can draw amazing now, but it took her 10 years of constant practice, and because she loved it. So that works. So if you love something and you consistently practice at it, you will be able to get better. But if you don't love it, what's the point? But the whole idea is that everybody has capacity to use color and patterns in a way that is working for them. I mean, you can use it in clothing. You can paint the wall. You don't need special skills to paint the wall. You can choose colors in the digital format that will be pleasing for you, that you can rearrange and manipulate in a way that will be your creative expression. You can use a brush and do some kind of shapes. They don't have to look like someone else's because they're yours. And in that process, that is the separation from the critical mind into the creative mind. So if nobody taught you how to paint, that's fine. Pick up a brush and make some dots with it. That's all.
That's awesome. Maybe I will try that. So, what is your vision for the future of this company? From where you've come and where you are, we've gotten there. Where would you like it to go?
So because I started in corporate and with project management, and through my studies and through my work with clients, I've been to the extreme opposite of that. I've been working to the extreme other end of the spectrum. The idea that I have been working with is how to bring the creativity into the corporate, how to bring it more into the business, because we actually already have something that exists in business, which is called agile project management. And that is, in my mind, is the exact reflection of like feminine approach, because agility depends on constantly iterating the scope. So my idea is, if creativity and art could be brought out of that field of artists and creatives and back into the business world, back into the corporate world, incorporated within that sphere of agile project management, then we can shift the entire way how we dealing with business or how corporations are working and performing. And that can really unify and integrate both masculine and feminine in the microcosm, but also in macrocosm.
I love that. The biggest challenge that I see to that is that even though the thought leaders in leadership, Simon Sinek and Adam Grant and Brene Brown and so many others, really have more heart-centered, probably more feminine approaches to leadership, and not necessarily feminine, but more heart-centered and less, micromanaging than the standard patriarchal capitalist leadership that we have seen. It doesn't seem like that's really been getting to most of these corporate leaders in terms of the way that they lead their teams. And I think most change inside of these organizations takes such a long time because the people need something that they are not getting from their leadership, but the leadership immediately blames the employees, right? And you hear it all the time. People don't want to work today, blah blah blah. Listen, I don't know if you guys are watching Gen Z right now, but they are highly motivated. They will take the time, they will dig in, they are passionate. When they have purpose, they will run headlong through a brick wall for hours. So it is not about them being unmotivated and not hard workers. It is about the fact that they're not getting their needs met in these environments. And so I wonder how you would get leadership to adopt something like this, because it sounds like it would be more flexible, which you would require. And traditionally, leadership that's more masculine presenting tends to be a little bit more, well, you didn't show up to work and this is your fault. And I'm going to put you on a PIP because you didn't meet this unreasonable timeline or growth expectation that I had for you that no one could have made. And I'm going to blame it on you. How would you mesh those two things together?
Well, first of all, it's a process. But one of the things we have seen in the last 4 years is something that's been labeled the resignation revolution. People are quitting. Okay, so you are a leader and your company is suffering because people are leaving. Okay, hello, that is the first sign that something is not quite right. So your next step as a leader would be either to keep strong and keep forcing things to go the same way, or adjust and adapt and become flexible. And that is the personal choice. But one of the things that I always see is that big organizations grow into this kind of organism that then develops sort of like an immune system, which then becomes resistant to any change. But the solution to that is something that is called skunkworks. If you never heard of it, and if listeners never heard of it, that is the concept that has been started by the Lockheed Martin Corporation. It was the established during World War II, and it was designed for cutting-edge military aircraft. What is so special about that? Well, they were a separate kind of group. They separated themselves from the big organization and they went into the warehouse and they worked by themselves. And the result of that separation from the bigger organization became the U-2 spy plane, which was then in the 1950s, was designed for reconnaissance missions. So whatever, it was the project that was extremely difficult. Now, nobody ever designed anything like that before, but they were able to create it under budget and within a timeline because they were separated out of the big organization. I mean, that's a historical fact. You can research it. And the whole idea behind it is that in order for the shifts in the companies to happen, there needs to be smaller organizations developed out of that, where there could be more flexibility, where people can become servant leaders instead of traditional leaders, where there could be more fluid approach, and where the flow state fundamentals can be brought in, where that can be, where people can be celebrated instead of being used as pawns in the machinery. And so that's how I see the transition. See the signs, use the historical data, and then incorporate new knowledge, new information, new techniques and strategies in order to shift where people are going to meet them there, not force them to be something else.
That is powerful. I love that example. And it's interesting that few things that you touched on inside of that. So the agility of smaller teams is simply unparalleled when you look at these very large organizations. And no question, you're going to have more innovation in a smaller team. But also the idea that you could be under budget and you could be ahead of your timeline when you have less bureaucracy in the way. And I think some of these bigger companies, they miss the mark in terms of it because the way that they've always done it is the way that they're comfortable with it. And they're not interested in giving up that control. And so those sound like the people that you wouldn't be interested in reaching. You would be interested in the people who are looking for a new innovative solution. But I also felt very inspired from that to say that small businesses have an opportunity. And I humbly believe, and I've talked about leadership. Those videos don't generally go anywhere on any of my algorithms, though, because they're like, what about small business? But when it comes to leadership inside of these smaller teams, you have an ability to take feedback in real time from your team, to lead from the team, to be a true servant leader. That has been so grossly weaponized by some of these companies. They like to say that they are servant leaders, but really what they're doing is very toxic, and it has nothing to do with servant leadership. It has everything to do with just trying to pull people apart from the inside and act like they're there for them. But small businesses could be the model for this success. They could really demonstrate and be basically little experimental playgrounds for us to test out these leadership strategies. And there's a great episode from Courtney Roy. I think she was episode 12 on the podcast. And she talks a lot about her leadership mentality with her team. And a lot of the things that she talks about align with what you're talking about. We can have somebody out and still get our needs met because we are here to cover for each other. And it's the understanding and the culture of the team instead of, well, gosh, she's not carrying her weight. And well, this person didn't do this thing. Well, guess what? We're all human beings. And when you need something, we're going to be here for you and we're not going to question it. And we're going to keep moving forward. And so they can do more with less when they have to, because she doesn't expect them to do that forever either. This isn't the, hey, now you have 3 hats. You're welcome to have 3 roles for a single amount of pay. And we're just going to keep doing that forever until you burn out. So I hope that we have more opportunities on this podcast and many of the podcasts, including yours, to be able to demonstrate how these smaller teams can get to those victories. Those will be great case studies for you to bring if you decide to do that.
Absolutely, that's a great thing. And small business is the direct representation of the agile project management, because the most common aspect between the two is constant iteration and scope adjustment. So people in small businesses are that which is agile leadership or agile project management is in big organizations, almost like direct correlation. And it requires face-to-face communication, constant feedback from the customer, adjustment to the scope and the services that are being provided. And then the results are dependent on that collaborative approach, highly collaborative approach, which small business cannot go without. They cannot follow a straight agenda and say, we're going to go from A to B in these number of steps. Usually there are so many twists and turns that are required for a small business that is just impossible to do it otherwise. So adaptability is the key within this aspect. So people in small businesses are leading the way and showing by example of what's possible. So we should look at them more and use them as inspiration, because they're really leading the way.
Oh, I love that. And I love how you're saying that they really do adapt and they have to. But so do these big corporations. And I find that they simply don't. They just try and strong arm their way through these challenges in a lot of moments, especially, thinking about the Great Resignation. I was hiring manager through the Great Resignation, and I watched a lot of my peers really struggle with those things. And the lack of reflection from the industry in general, and I mean the greater industry, all industries, corporate wise, the lack of reflection that came from that, where they were simply complaining and not saying, gosh, is it me? Am I the problem? They're not asking that in any way. They're just immediately victim blaming, victim shaming, and telling these young people that they should be the ones that are, biting the bullet every single time and taking the lesser end of the deal and just accepting circumstances, and they shouldn't have to change, and they shouldn't have to, well, I mean, we didn't make this global pandemic. Yeah, well, neither did your people. Sorry. So we all have to come together truly in community to be able to solve these things. And as much as small businesses can do it more easily, corporations could, but they would require a lot more open communication, transparency, better channels, and true trust between people. I have found that the vast majority of trust inside of layers in corporations is surface level smiles and knives behind backs.
Trust is a huge issue, and all toxicity really comes either in corporate environment or interpersonal relationships. It comes from lack of trust,
Mm.
which comes as a result of fear. Which, if I had a magic wand and can imbue everybody with personal responsibility and awareness that they are the problem before anything else, that could solve majority of the problems. Fortunately, there's a great song by Taylor Swift called "Rooting for the Anti-Hero" that just lays it out and explains it in plain language. Go listen to that. That's very useful.
I love it. Now we have a soundtrack. Perfect. So, what is one thing that you wish everyone knew about running a small business?
Well, as I said, it takes a lot longer than you expect. It's going to cost a lot more than you expected. But if it is aligned with your true kind of true north, where you believe you're going, where your intuition is activating and you're hearing the inner voice and connecting with your body, then it's worth pursuing. Anything that is really lighting you up is worth pursuing, even though it's difficult, even though there are challenges, even though everybody says pursue what you love, and then you're faced with incredible difficulties. It's all a hero's journey. And on the way, you're going to meet opponents, but you're also going to meet supporters and guides. And eventually, if you persevere, you will come out a different person with a different business that you didn't start off with. And that's the beauty of the whole process. The whole point of business is personal development. It's actually a vehicle for the personal development. It's not it is supposed to make money, it is supposed to provide value, but first and foremost, it is a vehicle for personal development and growth.
I love it. That's beautiful. And what's one simple way that people could support your business without spending any money?
They can support it by listening to my podcast, by sharing the videos that I create, by watching my YouTube channel. That is the easiest way. And for letting me know what speaks to them the most. I love the feedback and I love to hear what they would like to hear more about. That would be an incredible support for me and my business.
Oh, I love that. And I think I'd heard something years ago where somebody had said, I don't hold positive things in my heart and walk away. So if they walk past somebody and they love their jacket, they're going to tell them, even if they're a complete stranger. If they're talking to somebody and they have a brilliant idea, they're going to tell them. They're just not going to hold that back. And so I like to think of that as my standard for giving feedback because I don't believe that everybody is capable of hearing critical feedback. Not all feedback is critical though. Plenty of it is that positivity of gosh, this is the best video that you've put out in a while, or man, this really inspires me, or gosh, I needed to hear this today. Thank you so much. Because those are the little things that keep us going. And everybody has experienced one of those little things coming to them that has kept them going through a challenging moment. And oftentimes, what people don't realize is that small businesses, when they are making content, it's kind of like shouting into the void because people they won't, even if they're watching the whole way through, they're not interacting and engaging necessarily with the content because it feels like, oh, well, that's a business. They don't really need me to be the one. Well, guess what? A small business, yeah, we need you to be the ones that are giving us the feedback because we're not getting it from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of feeling of competitiveness and short-sightedness and that lack mentality that is going around. And if only people held back more critical feedback and allowed and didn't held back more positive feedback, that would help everybody tremendously by being on the higher wavelength, by being more positive, more supportive. And also that relates to self-compassion. The less people are self-compassion, the more critical they are. So the more they loving to themselves and the more they understanding on themselves, the more they can reflect that out. So that is just where we are, but I'm hoping that can change with all the small businesses doing the work, which allows them to elevate and evolve and expand and lead the way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Now we're coming to the end of our time here, but is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you'd like to be able to share?
We've covered so much. I don't even know what else. We could go into more of those topics in a lot more in depth. So there isn't anything specific that you haven't asked. I just love speaking about all of these aspects, the feminine and masculine, the archetypes, the flow state, the combination and integration and patterns, all of that is part of us as a person and part of our businesses as an expression of ourselves. So we covered a lot, and maybe we should make another episode for further, but it's
we
really cool.
might need a part 2.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. And I thank you so much for taking the time. Artdiversion.com, people can go to be able to check you out. I'll make sure that once all of the post editing and stuff like that is there, we get everything linked up and we're tagged to accounts and stuff like that. But please make sure that you are finding Art Diversion on all of your social channels and you're following and interacting with some content, whether it's just liking. Comments are great. Feedback is also awesome. But Pauline, thank you so much for taking all the time today.
Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of your day. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. This is absolutely one of my favorites. I say that every single time, though, because all of these small businesses are amazing and they are going to change the world. But we need to be able to support our small businesses. And this week is really special. And I almost forgot to talk about it. It's Small Business Week. So if you haven't shopped at a small business in a while, or you haven't gotten your needs met with a small business, now is the time. This is the week to do it. Or make a plan for this weekend. I understand people are busy, long work days and stuff like that. But if it's really hard for you to think about the last time that you shopped with a small business, this is your call to action. Find one. I know they're not always easy. Please make sure that you're interacting with our content. If you can, give us a comment. Let us know what you resonated with most over the course of this episode, and definitely be following us on whatever channels you're finding this content on. We really appreciate you taking the time and wish you the best. Thank you.